Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the Bmw S58 engine reliability. Now this engine can be found in all the G series M cars. This is the new M engine that BMW produced. This is the 3 litre 6-cylinder engine. This is what now they're giving all the M cars, and you've got to think, because BMW now have gone downhill with giving everyone a 1.5 cylinder engine, then a 2-cylinder engine to make up for the 3 litres, and now instead of making 4 litre V8s and 5 litres like they used to, they've now gone to giving the M cars a 3 litre engine. And who would have thought, you know, giving a 3 litre inline 6 engine for M car? But a lot of people choose to love it, but it's one of the cars I wouldn't own. I'm about to explain the reasons now why, because BMW got this engine completely wrong. A lot of people are gonna argue with me about this and say I'm wrong, but with the amount of problems the S58 has, I think you guys need to be aware of it before you plan to buy one, because I do know this engine quite well already, and I already know of a lot of the common problems, and it's not cheap, and it's also not easy to replace when it goes wrong either, because it's very expensive because of the way BMW literally designed this engine. And I'm not going to sit and say they didn't try to design it better than the S63, because they did, but realistically what they've done is actually made it more expensive to be able to maintain when it goes wrong. So the first one on them is valve cover gasket oil leaks. Now, as many of you guys know, this is a normal BMW issue. The valve cover gaskets always like to leak on BMWs, and that's one, because of the way the engines are slanted, two, because of the amount of heat that these engines produce under the bonnet. A lot of people ain't aware of that. A lot of people do leave it. And when you leave the valve covers to just leak free and not check them or not get them changed, this is where people run into issues. Because when you leave that valve cover to carry on leaking, what ends up happening is you're actually losing your oil to go all over your engine bay. And also, you're then throwing oil over everything else on the engine, which can end up causing other bits that actually fail. And there's a lot on the S58 to go wrong, a lot of electrical connectors that the oil being that hot can actually melt through and actually destroy your connectors. Now, there is a simple way to tell if your valve cover is leaking oil, because it ends up dripping onto the exhaust or the headers, is you'll be able to smell it into your cabin. But a lot of people ain't aware of it. And as many of you guys know, these S58 engines end up in the wrong hands. They do get ragged around. And once they're ragged around, these people just pass them on, hoping that that person is gonna go and rectify it and fix the issue. So if you are going to buy one, make sure to check that the valve cover has been done, because as many of you guys know, it is a big job on the S58 engine. Many people make you believe it's not. It really, really is. And it's costly as well, because it's in an M car. You take it anywhere, they're going to charge you through the nose to replace that. So therefore, do make sure to replace your valve cover gasket if it's leaking. Do not leave it, because that's where people go wrong, and that's where it damages the other things we're going to speak about in a second. The next one is coolant loss. A lot of people come to me with the S58 saying that their car is losing coolant. That engine, the S58 engine, because it has turbo, it runs a lot more heat than your normal engine. Now, coolant loss is going to be normal on any kind of M engine. You need to find where the coolant is coming from. Now, this didn't happen on the older M engines. It's only happened since BMW decided to go over to turbo systems. The same with the S63, because as many of you guys know, and if some of you won't know, the turbos use the coolant to cool the turbos down as well. So you've got a lot to be able to diagnose. Most of the time, it's usually coolant hoses that break or the radiators going out. The radiators on them do like to just spring a leak, same way the coolant hoses do. And obviously, as many of you guys know as well, BMW use plastic coolant hoses. They do crumble, they do break, and they do spring a leak. A lot of people won't be aware of it until they get a light on their dash saying their coolant level is low. They top it up, continue to drive, go another 100 miles, then it comes back again. That's when they start trying to investigate where the problem's coming from. Or what a lot of people seem to do is just keep topping it up and driving the car instead of getting the problem rectified. If you do get the coolant light come up on your dash, investigate it immediately, because it isn't just that your coolant will go low, because coolant is not meant to go low. No matter how hot it is out there, nothing. You are not meant to lose coolant from your car. Coolant does not just evaporate. Okay, if your coolant is going down, it means you have a leak coming from somewhere, and you guys are gonna have to find where it's coming from. It could be a coolant leak, it could even be your turbos. It could be the turbos using too much coolant as well to cool them down, which then means the turbos are having an issue. This is where you guys need to really investigate. It could even be one of 3 of your water pumps as well, which we'll get onto in a minute, about the water pump system on the S58 system, because the water pump system is usually notorious for having a coolant problem. And I'll tell you why that is, because if many of you guys ain't aware, the water pumps on them do like to fail, and the reason they like to fail is because they use a 3-way water pump. So you've got one water pump which drives the engine and cools the engine. You've got another pump built on which actually helps cool the turbos, and you've also got another water pump built on which actually cools the cabin. Now it's half mechanical and half electric. A lot of people won't be aware of that, but it's a 3-way water pump, and when it goes wrong, it's very costly. So the electric water pump side is actually to cool the cabin and to actually cool the turbos. The mechanical side is actually to cool the actual engine. And that's where a lot of people are not aware of that. But it does like to fail. And when the electric side does fail, especially because it's needed to cool the turbos, that's where your problem ends up being. That's why you end up with serious coolant loss, and that's why you end up with overheating issues from that 3-way water pump. Because if the electric stops, it will damage your turbos. And look, forget the cabin air inside, you don't need to worry about that. But the electric side is very, very important for the turbo system. And the turbos, I would rather not go out. I'd rather the mechanical side go out for the cooling of the engine than the electric side for the turbos, because the turbo is costly to replace. Another one on the S58 is oil filter disintegration. The oil filters on them like to disintegrate in the oil filter housing. Nobody knows why. A lot of people, even BMW, are under the reason thinking it's due to the heat. That's why they end up disintegrating, because of all the forced induction from the turbos. Nobody's managed to figure out why that happens or how to solve it either. But yes, the oil filters do like to disintegrate, and that's exactly why it's very, very important if you own an M car to make sure you change your oil every 5,000 miles to be able to check the oil filter, because guess what? If you don't check that oil filter, this is the main reason why a lot of rod bearings are going out on the S58 engine as well, because them oil filters disintegrate. It stops the oil flow going around the engine, which ends up destroying your rod bearings. A lot of people fail to check that, and that's one of the reasons why rod bearings actually fail, from the oil filter disintegrating on the S58 engine. So do make sure to be checking your oil filter and changing your oil regularly. This shouldn't be something I should be able to tell people. People seem to go by BMW schedule of 10,000 miles. Do not go by it, not even on an M car. Change your oil every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, regardless you use it or you don't use it, because otherwise it will destroy the bottom ends on them. Another one on the S58 is the turbochargers failing, and they fail due to oil starvation, again, purely thanks to the oil filter disintegrating in the oil filter housing. This is why it's so important, like I say, to make sure you check your oil and change it, and also do it yourself, because as well, the reason a lot of the time the oil filter disintegrates is due to the heat of the engine, and also people over tightening the oil filter cap. Do not over tighten the oil filter cap, and make sure you use a good name oil filter, because if you don't and that oil filter disintegrates, and I've seen it many times on the M52 engines where people have over tightened them and the oil filter gets crushed, and that can cause a lot of problems for the Vanos system, especially on the M52. If it gets crushed, you'll suffer with oil starvation to the turbo, because the oil cannot flow. It needs to be able to flow. And if the oil filter is crushed, you're basically causing a blockage in the oil filter housing. And causing a blockage will lead to oil starvation to the engine and also the turbos. And that is why a lot of the time the turbo goes bang, because of oil starvation from the oil filter housing being disintegrating in the oil filter housing. That's why I'm saying to you guys, do make sure to check oil all the time on these engines, and make sure to check your coolant, because it's not a joke. At the end of the day, these engines do suffer with it, and it's just a common problem. There's nothing you can really do to rectify it. Until someone comes out of a way to rectify it, you're going to have this issue. That's why I'm recommending change your oil and check your filter, and just do not over tighten your oil filter cap. Another problem with them is rod bearing failure. Rod bearing failure has always been notorious on BMW M cars, and it's no different on the S58. The reason these end up suffering rod bearing failure is purely because people, why? Ragging them around from cold before the oil gets time to circulate and protect the engine. I have said this many, many times on M cars. These kind of people who buy these cars should not be allowed to own them, because these people are getting these cars and just ragging them around with no clue how engines work, or how the oil works around the engine. And these people, BMW should put them through a course before they are allowed to buy an M car, because these people do not know what they're doing. They're buying them, ragging them around, and then a lot of these people are using either cheap grades oils or not changing the oil on time, which leads to the rod bearing failure. And this was always common on M cars, and it's still becoming common now. There has been loads of cases already on the S58 where the rod bearings have gone out. And this is why I'm going to be telling you guys right now, if you haven't had your rod bearings checked and you have bought your car second hand, third hand, fourth hand, go and get your rod bearings replaced, because the rod bearings do go out on the S58, and you guys don't want to have to face that, because then you will need a whole new crankshaft, and then you'll be needing to rebuild the whole bottom end of the engine, which many of you guys do not want to be doing. So do make sure to actually do that and get your rod bearings checked out if you haven't. I know people thought, oh, by buying the S58, now they avoid them problems. Unfortunately, you don't. You're going to need to get your rod bearings checked or have them replaced, because unfortunately, unless you bought the car from new and know its history, you have got no clue how that car's been treated all its life. Transmission on the S58. Many people, as you know, are having shifting issues and rough shifting issues with their transmission. Now, there was meant to be an update to rectify that on the G series to correct the shift pattern on them. Unfortunately, the update didn't resolve the shifting issues. BMW tried to also reset the adaptions on the gearbox. It didn't correct that either. Now, if you are getting shifting issues, that's because of the heat of the engine. What ends up happening is all that heat that is being produced from the S58, especially from the turbo area. My best advice to you is to get your filter and your transmission fluid changed, and that will sort out delayed issues with the shifting and also your rough shifting issues as well. Many people ain't aware of that. They think, oh, take it back to BMW and update it. They get the update done, then try blame BMW, saying, no, it didn't rectify. Get the fluid change. People don't drive these cars normally, and of course nobody's going to drive an M car normally. They do redline them. Therefore, there was always going to be a problem with the gear shifts, and that's down to people having to correct that issue by changing the fluid, changing the filter, and also resetting the adaptions after. That's the only way to resolve it. Make sure to get that done on your gearbox if you're having rough shifting issues or it's delayed with the shifting as well. Make sure to change that fluid, because I'm telling you, if you don't, your gearbox will grenade. So the next one on these is the high pressure fuel pump. Now, as many of you guys know, this is a direct injection engine. Just like all the rest, B38, B48, that's the way BMW have gone now. Direct injection. And because the S58 produces so much heat from the turbo, from the engine itself, this is the exact reason why the high pressure fuel pumps end up going out, purely because of all the heat transfer underneath. Now, when the high pressure fuel pump does go out, you're going to go into reduced power mode, which is limp mode, because it's cutting off the cylinder, especially when you go to floor it. A lot of people will think it's the turbos when it's actually not, it's the high pressure fuel pump. Because if the fuel pressure is not what the engine wants, it's going to cut the power, because it's noticed that one of the injectors is not getting enough fuel. And that's to actually save the engine and actually save the cylinder in question. So if you do have any issues, the high pressure fuel pump will be the culprit for these. And like I say, they do go out and they're not going to be cheap, especially on an S58 engine. They're definitely not going to be cheap, purely because obviously it's a 6-cylinder. And not only that, if the high pressure fuel pump's gone out, it means and you keep driving it like that, you just keep turning off the light and just keep trying to drive it or reset it. What's going to end up happening is you're going to end up damaging the injectors. And then a lot of people, as I said before, end up replacing the high pressure fuel pump thinking the problem is still there. The problem is still there because your injectors have gone now as well. Because that's what happens when you try and run with the high pressure fuel pump that's already damaged and trying to keep running the car instead of just replacing the problem. Now, I know a lot of you, if you've got these M cars, you're going to be able to afford the maintenance anyway, but there's a lot of people who buy them cheap and don't want to actually put the money into it. They'd rather just get rid of it and pass it on to the next person without the thought. And obviously any new owner is not just going to go and floor a car that they don't know, so they're not aware of the problem until they do get comfortable with the car. That's why I'm telling any of you guys, if you're in the market to go and buy one, make sure to floor it and test it in every gear to make sure there is no misfires or any drivetrain malfunction lights coming on where it's going into reduced power, because the high pressure fuel pumps are weak, especially on BMW direct injection, and they will go out. And make sure to use high quality fuel only. I would only recommend 99. Do not use anything other than that, especially in an M car. If you can afford an M car, you can afford to run V-Power and 99 upwards. Do not run any cheaper fuel in that car, because it wouldn't make sense and it makes you look stupid considering you've gone and bought an M car and you're running it on the cheapest fuel you can get. As I said, a lot of it is to do with leaks. And like I said, they do like to leak from the valve cover. They can leak from the sump gasket as well. You guys just have to be on point and make sure you check these things. Do make sure you check them, because like I said, if your sump gasket is leaking as well and you're losing oil from the bottom end, that's where your rod bearings are going to go out. That's why I tell everybody, always check your oil. As many of you guys know, BMW have it on the dash where you can check it. Therefore, always check your oil before you go to a long drive or do a drive, because if that oil runs low, you will damage your bottom end. And like I said, the bottom ends are notorious for going out already on the S58, thanks to the oil filter disintegrating anyway. So just make sure to actually check that, because if you do run low on oil, you risk your bottom end going out and the rod bearings going out. That's why a lot of the time the rod bearings do go out as well, for the sump gasket leaking, and people are not aware of it. They just end up finding a load of oil underneath when they finally go to get it checked and put it up on a lift. That's when they notice it. The next one I want to bring your attention to is the recalls on the S58. If many of you guys ain't aware, there's 2 recalls that are on the S58 engine. One of them is knock sensors. So if you're getting any kind of pinging, misfiring, or any kind of knock, it will be your knock sensors. There is a recall for that from BMW on the S58. It was a common issue with the knock sensors. I'm not 100% sure what it was. I don't know if it was a faulty batch of them. They do replace them for free, so you can take your car to BMW and have your knock sensors rectified. You can easily check it online to see if you've got any recalls outstanding. So the next recall is the main bearings. Now, this problem is mainly a problem on the manual S58 engines. So if you have anything other than that, you don't have to worry. But I do know as well, some of the other ones with the auto transmission were having this issue as well. So therefore, make sure to check it, because if you guys ain't aware of it, there is a recall, and BMW have to rectify that on the main bearing issue and also on your knock sensor issue, which is very, very relevant. I don't know, many of you won't be aware of that. If you're planning to buy one, make sure them recalls have been done. You can easily check online here in the UK. If not, check wherever your government allows you to check for outstanding recalls, because BMW have to rectify it for you for free. And those are the 2 recalls that are outstanding on the S58 engine that many people probably ain't aware of and haven't had done as of yet. So there you have it, guys. That's everything you need to know on the BMW S58 engine reliability. As I said, these are the things you need to check before buying one, and make sure all these things have been done, or these are the things you're going to come across if you actually do own one. It's not to say every single person will come across this, but it depends on how the car is looked after. But the oil filter disintegrating is a big, big problem, and it's something you guys need to make sure you are aware of. And also always be checking your rod bearings, because of the way it disintegrates. Do make sure to check your rod bearings, and also make sure to check your turbo as well. Because as I said, the way the water pumps are set up on them, the turbo can easily fail just by that water pump to be stopped working, especially electric side. Your engine might be being cooled, but if that water pump stops pumping the coolant to the turbo, then your turbo is going to go completely bang as well. So that's what I mean. There is a lot you've got to be aware of when buying a BMW S58, and also a lot you've got to be aware of when actually owning one. I hope this video is going to help many of you guys regarding the BMW S58 engine. Thank you very much for watching. It's BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.